What's up, guys? 2-1 last night. It looked like it might not get there, but of course, NC State just had a horrific second half. Duke shot 63% from the field in the second half. I don't know what you can do about that. Not expected. NC State was in the game into the second half, and then it just completely unraveled. But Sacramento State got there. Arguably, they should have won the game outright. They covered fairly easily in the end, but it got to a point near the end where there was an out-of-bounds play in a tied game with like 40 seconds left where the refs said that it was out of bounds off of Sacramento State on a defensive rebound, and the Sacramento State player had kind of had his feet over the out-of-bounds line, over the baseline, but he wasn't actually out, and he grabbed the rebound or grabbed the ball and threw it to one of his teammates, so it was a legit rebound. He was not actually out of bounds. He did not step on the floor out of bounds. His feet were in the air above the out-of-bounds line. So whenever he actually touched his feet on the ground, he was actually in bounds. So it should have been a legit rebound for Sacramento State. They called it out of bounds off of Sacramento State. They reviewed it, and they still didn't overturn it. And that gave Eastern Washington the lead back because they got a possession, and they wound up getting a free throw out of it, one free throw. So still 1-point game. So Sacramento State still did have another chance to win the game and didn't, but that call was bad. I don't understand how that didn't get overturned upon replay. That was kind of frustrating, but Sacramento State still covered. And then Chicago Bulls looking like they might not cover. They were kind of just hovering right around that number. And somehow I didn't see the end of that game. Somehow they wound up winning outright. And I'm all right, I'll take it, I guess. I was right on every single game on the NBA board yesterday, but it's like, no, got to still be selective, even though that would hurt if Chicago was the only game that you played on the entire NBA card and the only game you're wrong about. That would be completely insane. That would suck. And then NHL, I was actually right on the two leans on Florida and the Bruins, but what can you do about that? I did not have any plays there. Let's go to today. We got college basketball. March Madness is in full swing, baby. You got conference tournaments, more of them in play now. Patriot League starts tonight. Sun Belt starts tonight, and Horizon starts tonight. The Horizon games tonight are probably the least interesting because the three higher seeds in those, or better seeds, are just giant favorites. I think, if I remember correctly, unless you think Detroit Mercy is going to win a game when they have one win on the season. I don't know about that. I would say in the A-Sun tournament, which is continuing, I'm not going to play either of those or any of those games. There are actually 4 games in that tournament now. But in the A-Sun, you're in a situation, this is the only conference that's in a situation like this tonight, where some of those teams, Queens and Jacksonville, both played last night and won to advance in the tournament. So this is like a tournament angle that you can use where people might think, well, wait a minute. That means they're like totally unrested because they played last night. They're on a back-to-back, right? So isn't that a disadvantage? I don't think so. When it comes to tournament time, I think winning that first game like that, it gives you some momentum, and it lets you like get that nervousness out of the way, that nervousness that you might have at the beginning of the tournament. Now you've already played one tournament game, you've won, so you have the momentum, you have a little confidence, you have less like opening jitters, whereas the teams that are coming into it cold and did not play yet and have those buys coming into this round, they could come out a little bit cold, not have their rhythm down yet, and they might be a little bit nervous potentially to start that like tournament. So I actually think it's an advantage to Queens and who was the other one? Jacksonville. Those teams both won last night. They were both underdogs last night and both won. So I think those teams might have a little bit of an edge early, but it's nothing that I really want to play. In college basketball, we do also have another one of these unranked home favorites against a ranked underdog. I just don't want to get involved in this one. That's Florida against Alabama. I think the line's flipped from Alabama being a dog to Florida being a favorite. Florida being a dog to Florida being a favorite. Excuse me. It's flipped from Bama being a favorite to Florida being a favorite. According to like Ken Palm's numbers, Alabama should still be the favorite in this one. So the line's a little bit off. I don't want to really lay a price with Florida here, but I believe it is Florida's senior night. It is their final home game. It is going to be a big game for them. Alabama, I believe, already beat Florida once. It was a close game, though, at Alabama. And Alabama is coming off a game that they definitely get up emotionally for against Tennessee. So they're coming off that. Florida coming off a pretty big game as well, I would say, against South Carolina. But Alabama kind of blew that game against Tennessee. They were winning in the second half. Unfortunately, I had Alabama in that game. They had a decent lead in the second half, wound up falling apart in the end. So they're coming off kind of a pretty big, like, emotional high spot there. So I do think Florida is still in the slightly better spot. I lean that way, but I just can't quite do that. Can't quite get there with it. Lean against Dayton as well. This is not a home unranked favorite, but I would just say that Dayton, they're coming off a loss in a big game against Loyola Chicago, and they have their home senior night, their final home game up next against VCU, which is also a revenge game for losing at VCU. And they already beat this St. Louis team, although it was only by 5 at home. So it's possible they kind of overlook St. Louis in this game. So I don't like Dayton in that one. Dayton kind of falling apart here down near the end. Obviously they'll still be in the A10 tournament, and they're still power rated. I think is the best team in the A10, but they have not been doing well as of late. St. Louis did get a win in their last game against Rhode Island to maybe kind of get some momentum going, and this will be their last home game of the season, I believe, as well. And then UNLV, I believe, is the other home favorite against a ranked road underdog, but I don't want to get involved in this one either. UNLV's reeled off a lot of wins recently. They're beating up mostly on the bad teams in this conference. So they have 2 good wins in there against New Mexico on the road, which is crazy, and a home win over Colorado State, which I believe I was on maybe. I forget if I was on that one or not. But other than that, they beat up just on the drags of the conference otherwise. But they've won a bunch of recent games. So they're on a nice streak, actually somehow putting themselves in like the conversation a little bit. Now they got a big game against San Diego State tonight. San Diego State maybe in a little bit of a worse spot, because they have their senior day against Boise up next, which I think is also kind of a revenge game because they lost at Boise. UNLV, they already beat at home by double digits, so UNLV would be the side to lean to here, but actually San Diego State's a favorite right now. Never mind, 1.5 point favorite. So that angle doesn't apply just because the line moved. That angle's a little bit stupid, to be honest. It's not stupid because it does indicate that the books are kind of telling you something. Like they're okay, like the books are obviously okay with like taking this amount of action on like that favorite at that price. Like they know they're going to be lopsided on the favorite at that price. So that's kind of what's going on when they set lines like that. So it is an indicator when it looks way too easy. Basically, it usually is. So that's kind of the thing about lines like that. But enough about all that. Going to the games that I'm actually on. One of the games I'll be on is in the American East. We have a situation similar to what we had last night. We actually kind of have 2 because I think UMass Lowell is kind of in a similar spot too. Where UMass Lowell, I believe they're locked into the 2 seed at this point in the American East. I don't think Bryant can do anything about that because I think UMass Lowell they're 1 game ahead of Bryant, and they have the tiebreaker against Bryant because they beat them twice. I believe head-to-head is the tiebreaker. So I think UMass Lowell is locked into the 2 seed. They're playing at Maine, and they already beat Maine at home earlier this year. So I would lean to Maine in that one because UMass Lowell doesn't really have that much to play for. And they did just lose a win streak in their final big game, really, against Vermont on the road. They lost to Vermont, which was a season sweep for Vermont. So I believe UMass Lowell is locked into the 2. Don't really have much to play for there, having to go to Maine. But the game that I'm actually going to be on in the American East is the other game where there's a team with nothing to play for that I think is similar to that Eastern Washington spot last night. I'm going to go against Vermont in this game. And let me see. The line, I think, has gone up a little bit on Vermont. It's gone up from 7.5 to 8. I think 8.5s might be out there as well. I'm not even sure. Let me see. What do we got going on here? Look quickly. Yeah, it looks like there can be 8.5s out there as well. I think the line, if you look at KenPom, I think he has the line kind of somewhere in the ballpark of where it is right now, 7 or 8. Vermont is one of the slowest paced teams in the country. They do play good defense. They're 351st in tempo, according to KenPom. New Hampshire is all the way up at 27th. So even though New Hampshire is the worst overall team, both offensively and defensively, I think that the situation calls for a play on New Hampshire. And New Hampshire does have this pacing discrepancy here where they're the 27th pace team in the country. So they're a way faster team than Vermont. So this is going to be a pacing collision. So if New Hampshire is able to speed up this game and kind of throw Vermont out of their element, I think that may wind up being fortuitous for New Hampshire. And of course, this is New Hampshire's senior night, but Vermont has nothing left to prove, man. They just beat the other top 2 teams in the conference, UMass Lowell and Bryant, back-to-back, which I believe completed a season sweep against both of them. They've only lost 1 game on the entire season in conference play, which was to NJIT somehow. NJIT beat UMass Lowell and Vermont during the season, but Vermont's got nothing to play for. They're 3 games up, just like Eastern Washington was last night, and this line is very similar, too. This is crazy how similar this looks to last night's game. where in both cases, just like Eastern Washington last night, the team's coming off beating the other good teams in the conference. They have a 3-game lead in the conference, and they're laying 8.5 on the road on another team's senior night. So very similar to last night. So how can I not do it, recognizing these patterns? Vermont, coming off a nice win over UMass Lowell by double digits. Now they're going to New Hampshire, a team they already beat at home by 16 earlier this year, an easy win over New Hampshire. Vermont was able to really hold New Hampshire scoring down in that game. New Hampshire, not really a good scoring team, but they are a fast team. So the pace might wind up being a little bit different in this game than it was in that game. In that game, New Hampshire shot really, really poorly, 19% from 3. That's probably a little bit of an outlier. Vermont themselves didn't shoot particularly well either. Really. The game was actually statistically kind of close, so closer really than the final score kind of indicates. And Vermont was a 10.5-point favorite in that game at home, so laying 8.5 on the road based on that seems like a little bit of a high number, even though we're further on into the season and we know Vermont's a better team than maybe we thought they were at that point. Maybe New Hampshire's a little bit worse than we thought they were at that point, but is there really a reason for the line to be that much different? Actually, that game was pretty recent, too. It wasn't that long ago. Vermont was a 10.5-point favorite at home. Now they're an 8.5-point favorite on the road. That seems crazy. And just like last night, I'm wondering how the books aren't accounting for like the motivation factor here, where Vermont really has nothing to play for. They're already locked into the 1 seed in the American East. So they're already looking ahead to the American East tournament, which I believe in this case they're going to be hosting it. So all of that's done. They have nothing to play for here, really. They already beat UMass Lowell and Bryant, who are right behind them, just to stick it to them. Season swept both of them, won the conference regular season, up by 3 games. They have no reason to show up in this game, no motivational aspect here. So it's similar to that game last night, like I said. Going to a team they already beat easily at home. New Hampshire might have something to say about that. New Hampshire's on a 3-game loss streak and lost 4 of their last 5, and that 4th loss that's in there was the one to Vermont. So obviously, New Hampshire's obviously going to be focused. They have the team that's dominated this conference for I don't know how long. Vermont wins this conference every year. New Hampshire has Vermont coming into their house for their senior night. I think that's going to pump up New Hampshire, man. Because even though New Hampshire will be playing in the tournament, I think they probably know that they're probably not going to be able to win the tournament. Maybe they'll be able to make some noise or something in the tournament. I don't know. But this is going to be one of their biggest games of the year, where they have Vermont, the top team in their conference, coming into their house. Big game. That's a big game for them, man. It's senior night. I think they're going to want to play. They're going to want to do something. They're coming off a couple ugly losses, both of them on the road. 3 ugly losses, the one being back at home against UMBC. That was a real hideous loss. And then they lost even worse, I think, at Albany, and then lost pretty badly at Binghamton as well. So those wins do not look good, losing to teams that are below them in the conference. And New Hampshire, I believe, they have 3 teams sitting at 6-9 behind them. So I think probably at least one of those teams, Binghamton maybe, I don't know, one of those teams probably at least has like some tiebreaker against New Hampshire and could like jump New Hampshire, or New Hampshire's sitting in the 4 spot right now. And I think having the 4 does matter in this tournament, because I think having the 4 does mean you host a game, or it means you have like a bye or something like that. I forget what it is, but there is a difference, I believe, between having the 4 and the 5 here. So that's a little bit of extra motivation as well. But Vermont coming into their house on senior night, that's a huge motivational spot, man. For New Hampshire, Vermont has absolutely nothing to gain by winning this game. They're going to want to get in and get out and not injure their players either. That's the thing. Like they have the American East tournament up ahead, and then obviously if they win that, they'll be in the NCAAB tournament. So they have a lot of stuff to look ahead to here, and they don't want to get their players injured either. And they don't really want to like show any of the like new wrinkles that they might have for the teams that might face them in the tournament. So Vermont really does not have much to play for, similar to Eastern Washington last night. So it's kind of like a get in, get out type of thing, and they don't really care about this game, I would have to imagine. So New Hampshire plus 8.5 is going to be one play. The other play in college is going to be on Cincinnati plus 6. This game is moving up, which is crazy. Oklahoma 3.5 up to, it looks like it's 5.5 at most spots now. I did see a 6 briefly out there. Maybe you could still get 6s on this. This is a bad spot for Oklahoma, man. As maybe not great as the spot looks for Cincinnati. Cincinnati's coming off a nice win over Kansas State, sure, at home. And that was coming off a tough game against Houston. They played pretty tough against Houston on the road. Lost that game and were still able to play a decent game after that against Kansas State. Cincinnati, I mean, they're no longer really considered to be a bubble team. They really don't have much to play here for. But I think they're going to be focused for Oklahoma, because Oklahoma beat them in their own house earlier this year by 4. Cincinnati lost at home to Oklahoma, which Cincinnati at least should have kind of like a home court advantage in those games because they're new to the Big 12 and the Big 12 teams aren't like used to playing there. But Oklahoma was able to go in and beat them. And even though this is senior night for Oklahoma, I mean, senior night means a little bit less, I guess, for these bigger conference teams, even though they do still have seniors on their team. It matters a little bit less for some of these big conference teams just because they tend to have fewer seniors. And Oklahoma, I believe, actually has, let me see, who do they have on their roster here? Yeah, I mean, they do have 4 seniors, but I don't know how many seniors are in like their starting lineups. Well, whatever. But the bigger conference teams tend to at least be less senior laden, so the senior night means a little bit less. But how could Oklahoma be like in a good spot here, even though it is senior day? You might say, well, they should be focused. But they have a Cincinnati team they already beat on the road coming in, which how can you really be that pumped about playing Cincinnati? Who's coming into your house. And Cincinnati might want to beat Oklahoma because Cincinnati's a newcomer to this conference and Oklahoma's on their way out the door to the SEC. So Cincinnati might want to get a win against them and just to like kind of boot them in the ass on the way out, even though Cincinnati's not a team that's been in the conference for long at all. They just came into this conference. So Cincinnati might want to just say, yeah, be done with you. Like, you're leaving. We're the new guys here. They probably want to win. Like, they're probably going to be motivated because this Oklahoma team beat them in their own house. Oklahoma might be a little bit less motivated despite it being senior night because they already beat Cincinnati. But look at what their schedule looks like, man. Oklahoma, they're coming off a game against Houston, the number 1 ranked team in the country. And Oklahoma was way behind in that game, double digits in the second half, and made a furious comeback throughout the later part of that game to come all the way back and somehow make it a really close game after it looked like they were dead. Houston was blowing them out of their own building. And then Oklahoma, in Norman, Oklahoma came all the way back and actually made it like I believe they wound up making it a tied game in the final minute of the game, and then Houston wound up beating them on a buzzer beater after Oklahoma was dead in the game, made a huge comeback to tie it in the final minute, so they actually had a chance to win the game against the number 1 team in college basketball right now, rankings wise, in Houston, and then still fell short because Shed on Houston hit a crazy buzzer beater shot at the end to just completely dashed their hopes. How do you turn around from a game like that, man? If you're Oklahoma, where you just put in so much effort to make that huge comeback against a Houston team like that, you want to putting up 85 on Houston, which is by far, I think, the highest point total Houston's allowed this year. Houston's the number 1 defensive team in the nation, according to KenPom. I don't think they'd allowed like hardly any team to even get like out of the 60s this year. I think they've only allowed a couple teams to even break 70 in this game, and Oklahoma put up 85 against them in a furious comeback. I think Houston maybe got a little bit complacent with a big lead like that, and Oklahoma having a shot to win the game and then still just having their heart ripped out on that buzzer beater by Shed. How do you turn around and play if you're Oklahoma, even though, yeah, it is senior night, but this spot is awful for Oklahoma. And I don't know why the line is moving up like this that much on Oklahoma. I mean, it could be power ratings, guys, because they do have Oklahoma as the better team, of course. Both of these teams not really a particularly fast-paced teams. They're both kind of middle of the pack tempo-wise, so I don't think there's a huge tempo collision here. Oklahoma, pretty well-rounded team. They actually play pretty good defense, better defense than offense. Cincinnati is actually the better defensive team, but the worse offensive team here, and only slightly better defensively. But still, you could say you're getting the better defense, getting points with Cincinnati here. But all that being said, I think it's a horrible spot for Oklahoma. It's got to be a hangover spot coming off the way that Houston game ended. And they have Texas up next, although it's on the road. That's a big game, too. Texas beat them in their own house, man. That's still the Red River rivalry. It's bigger in football, but still, Texas beat them in their own house. So I think Oklahoma's going to potentially have one eye looking forward to that game against Texas because they're going to want to beat Texas. And both of those teams are exiting the Big 12 after this, but it remains a big rivalry, Texas-Oklahoma. So Oklahoma's going to want to win that game and split the series. So this really is kind of a sandwich spot here. It's a rare situation where even though it's senior night, it's a bad spot and it's a sandwich spot for Oklahoma. So I'm going to take the points with Cincinnati in this one. So those are the 2 college basketball plays there. I think the line maybe has moved up, like I was going to say, just because the power ratings guys do have a little bit of a discrepancy here with Oklahoma. KenPom has Oklahoma probably in the 20s, maybe. Where does he have them? No, 37. So he actually has them quite worse. And Cincinnati only 10 ranking spots lower at 47. But I believe he still has the line at I don't know, somewhere around 5 in this game. So maybe that's why the line's moved up. But you can get plus 5.5 or 6 there. Moving on to NBA, we're only going to have one play in the NBA here. And this is a play I've been looking to play for a while now. And this line keeps moving up, which is just really crazy to me. It looks like it's 8, but it could maybe even go through the 8 to 8.5 here. And I'm going to take the Cleveland Cavaliers here, go against my Celtics, even though I'm wearing my Celtics hat here. If you're even though, yes, Cleveland is without Donovan Mitchell, that's true. So they're down their best player, but they're kind of used to him being out at this point because he's missed 2 games and now he's having, I think, surgery or something. So it looks like he's going to be out for who knows how long a period of time. But Cleveland, I don't think that's going to matter. I think that just means we'll get a little bit of extra value here. They've already played the injured player theory game, and I think they won in that game. Maybe I would have to go look, but they've played 2 games without him, and then in their most recent game, they had a bad game and lost. In that game where, you won that, I think they won the first game without Mitchell, and then you kind of take a step back and you get a little bit complacent. We just won without him. Okay, they beat the they beat Chicago. No, who did they beat? What? I'm looking through. They beat the Detroit Pistons, so that's not very impressive, but on the road. But still, they came off that win. They won their first game without Mitchell, thinking, yeah, maybe we'll be okay without Mitchell, and then they wound up losing by 9 to the Knicks at home. So that's not a good loss that they're coming off, really. The Knicks kind of been struggling offensively, although they're a good defensive team. But now they got the Celtics coming into their house, and they only have Atlanta up on deck. I think Cleveland's going to be real focused. How do you not be focused with the Celtics coming into your house? Even without Mitchell, I think Cleveland's going to really step it up for this game, and we're just getting extra value with them with Mitchell out. But this line's moved up from 7 through the 8 to where it's with 8 with juice now, with 67% of the cash on the Celtics and 74% of the tickets on the other side on the Cleveland Cavs. I don't know how that could possibly be the case. How could the Celtics not be getting the public action here if people know that Mitchell is out and they saw what the Celtics just did, which is why I'm going against the Celtics here? I don't know how the public could want anything to do with going against the Celtics here. So I'm not sure I buy those numbers there or the cash discrepancy or whatever. Look at what the Celtics are coming off of, man. They're coming off a historic win. They've won so many games in a row at this point. It looks like they can't be stopped. Everybody's basically handing them the NBA title at this point. They just beat the Warriors in a historic win. They were winning the game by like 44 at halftime, 82-38, which was the Celtics' largest halftime win in history, and I think the third or fourth or halftime lead, and the third or fourth largest halftime lead ever in NBA history. And they're coming off that game, and they did not even let up, and they wound up beating the Warriors by even more than that. I think they wound up beating them by 52 points, putting up 140. The Warriors aren't even a bad team. That's Steph Curry. That's a team that looks like they might be headed to the playoffs, and it started playing pretty well. And the Celtics did that to them and beat them by 52 points. How do you not get totally high on yourselves after a game like that? Just a historic blowout win over a good team that has one of the best players in the NBA on it. That's just crazy. This has to be a horrible letdown spot for the Celtics here. And who do they have up next? They start the road trip here against the Cavs, and then up next they have to go to Denver 2 days from now. That is a much bigger game than this. Going to Denver. Denver is one of the only teams in the NBA the Celtics haven't beaten this year, and Denver, I believe, was the first team to beat the Celtics at home. The Celtics only have a couple home losses this season, I think maybe 3 at this point, but I believe they were undefeated at home. Maybe they only had 1 loss. I think they were undefeated when Denver came in and beat them in Boston in a close game. And they're the returning champs. The Celtics haven't beaten them yet, and Denver was one of the only teams to beat them in Boston. Do you not think the Celtics are going to be looking ahead a little bit to that Nuggets game? Yeah, I think they will be. The Cavaliers, sure, they're a good team, but the Celtics might have reason to overlook them a little bit because they're without Mitchell now, and I believe the Celtics have already played them. Yes, the Celtics have played them twice in Boston this year, beat them twice, so the Celtics could easily overlook this Cleveland team, given what the situation looks like here. I'm going to take the points with Cleveland. It's a generous helping of points and just a major, major letdown spot. It's a sandwich spot for the Celtics with Denver coming up next. Even though Cleveland's a pretty good team, without Mitchell, they could maybe take Cleveland a little bit lightly here. Nobody's going to want to jump in front of the Celtics train here, but I think you have to, coming off such a win like that, just a historic absolute blowout win. How could they not be just feeling really inflated and high on themselves? Cleveland Cavs +8 or whatever the line is right now. And then we'll go to the NHL quickly. There's only one play I'm going to be on in the NHL because unfortunately there are a lot of teams in bad spots, but they're also against teams that are in bad spots, or the line is just too big, so I don't want to play either of them. I think Like the Islanders are probably in a bad spot because they just crushed the Bruins, but I just don't really want to muck in a game of the line that's kind of in no man's land at minus 170 or whatever. So I don't want to deal with that. I think the Bruins are probably in a bad spot because they're coming off a nice game last night where they beat Toronto, and the Bruins are on a back-to-back now and have no time off. And Edmonton's having to travel into their house, but still it's Edmonton, so the Bruins still might be focused on Edmonton. But the Bruins already just went into Edmonton and beat them, so I think Edmonton will have more reason to focus. So I lean against the Bruins. It's a back-to-back, and then what else was there? I think Vancouver's kind of in that road revenge reversal spot as well against LA. So I would lean to them because LA just went into Vancouver and beat them. So I would lean to the Vancouver side in that one. And then what else we got? Arizona's returning from a long road trip, but they're facing Chicago, who played yesterday. I don't really want to play Chicago on a back-to-back, even though they got trounced yesterday. Arizona's in the worst spot, returning from the longest road trip out of any of these teams, I believe, but still. And then it would involve, like, you'd have to take the Blackhawks puck line on that one if you wanted to take the Blackhawks. I guess I wouldn't mind the play if you did want to do that because Arizona's in the worst spot on the return home spot, but I don't quite want to get there with it. Winnipeg's also returning home from a road trip, although it's a shorter road trip. It still took them way out east, and they won the last two games, so I don't think Winnipeg is in that great a spot. Hosting Seattle, I would lean to the Seattle side there. It looks like the market is actually in agreement on that one. And then Pittsburgh, I believe, is returning. They're returning home from a long road trip, too, where they did get blown out in their final road game against the Oilers. So that doesn't look good. But Columbus is also in a bad spot. So Pittsburgh returning from a road trip, but Columbus on a back-to-back and just beat Vegas, the returning champs, yesterday, and now having to go on the road. So I don't like the spot for either of those teams there. So I don't want to be on Columbus because they're on a back-to-back and coming off a big win over a good team. At Pittsburgh, returning home from a road trip, I don't want anything to do with them either. They're the public team, and they got a pretty big line, and then it looks like it's actually moving down. All that being said, I just kind of wiped out the entire hockey board, so now you know which game I'm on pretty much because there aren't many left. The New Jersey Devils is where I'm going. This is a spot where I've missed some spots like this in some of the sports this year, but it seems to cash every single time it comes up, and that is a fired coach spot. So this is a good spot anyway, without even factoring in the fact that it's a fired coach spot. But New Jersey just fired their coach, and when teams fire their coaches, it tends to pump them up if they were not doing well and they didn't like that coach. New Jersey's going to have that interim coach in there, but that tends to put a fire under the team and just like motivate them, especially in that first game with the new coach. They want to play well, especially like I said, if they didn't like that coach, it'll tend to motivate them because they kind of get like that monkey off their back, get that coach out of there, and now they can kind of play a more loose style of game. And it has worked so many times recently on so many of these teams. I think maybe I lost on one of them, but every other game I can remember, like the Islanders did it earlier this year, and they played a really good game, even though I think they weren't even in the best spot. They were still able to do it. There have been, I believe, some NBA teams have done. I don't know if the Doc Rivers one wound up being the case because that was kind of a weird spot where it was just like, I don't think the Bucks hated Adrian Griffin and they weren't playing poorly. So that was a weird one, but it has to be a situation where the team's like playing poorly and that's why they fire the coach. But it's worked pretty well in college football and basketball in these recent games as well. There have been a bunch, and in the NFL, it happened a couple of times with the Raiders and the Chargers. Like, it worked really well for those teams out there. So we're going to do it on New Jersey. They just fired their coach, so I think they're going to be extra motivated, and they're coming off a game. I played New Jersey in the previous game because I thought it was a bad spot for the Kings coming off the Vancouver game. Kings were in a Vancouver sandwich. New Jersey still just got absolutely blown out in that game. They lost 5-1, and now, New Jersey is returning home from a road trip, so they're in a bad spot, but at least it's only a 3-game road trip, although it took them out to the Pacific Coast. But they don't have a big game up next. This game here is a much bigger game than their next game against St. Louis. So I don't think they're going to be unfocused here, man. Even though the return home tends to be a distraction spot, they're coming off an ugly 5-1 loss. They just fired their coach, and Florida is coming into their house. So I think New Jersey is going to be motivated. New Jersey is just playing some ugly hockey. Nobody's going to want to take New Jersey here against Florida, with Florida being really hot right now. But Florida's laying a pretty small price, down from minus 120 to minus 116, although it looks like they have 56% of the tickets, 65% of the cash right now. So the cash discrepancy on them, but the line moving kind of against them. So I don't know if that cash discrepancy is even accurate, but Florida is one of the hottest teams in hockey. And they've won 5 games in a row. I think they had a 6-game win streak before that, so they've won 11 of their last 12. And they're coming off another big win where they went into the New York Rangers place and beat them, and that was yesterday. So as bad as the Devils spot is because they're returning from the Pacific Coast, they at least fired their coach. They're coming off a real ugly loss, and they have 1 day off, where Florida has no days off, although they're not really traveling much. They're only going from New York to New Jersey. So, yeah, they don't have that much travel, but they're still playing a 3rd game in 4 days in different cities. They are also playing a 4th game in 6 days, all in different cities as well. And they have Philadelphia up next, which I think is a bigger game. And I think Philadelphia just beat them the last time they played them as well. Yeah. At home, Florida lost to Philadelphia. Florida's only lost 2 games going all the way back to January 19th. And one of those 2 games was to Philadelphia. And that's who they have up next. So I think they might even be looking ahead to that Philly game here. They might not pay much attention to a New Jersey team that's been kind of a train wreck. And New Jersey really has been allowing way too many goals. So they're going to have to get their goaltending straightened out here, because that's their one problem, because New Jersey certainly can score. Their offense is good. They put up a lot of shots. They can score a lot. Florida, they're in enough of a bad spot. I don't think they're going to be ready here. I think it's a sandwich spot. It's a back-to-back. It's a 4th game in 6 days, all in different cities, 3rd game in 4. So as bad as the spot is for New Jersey, I think it is a much better spot. And the fired coach aspect of it, I think, puts us over the top. You can take New Jersey. You can actually get them at even money right now. It looks like plus 100. That's going to do it for me, man. We won yesterday. We actually, I think I've had 2 wins in a row, although the win the prior day was a really small win. I can't remember. Was it a win? I don't even remember. But let's keep it going, man. Let's get back on track here. Let's keep this train moving in the right direction. One more time. College basketball, UNH, New Hampshire, plus 8.5. Cincinnati, plus 6. NBA, Cleveland Cavaliers, plus 8. And hockey, NHL, New Jersey Devils, plus 100. Don't mess with the Devils. The Devils. As you can see, this is clearly not my face that I've painted. Peace out.